Namo Tamashriye Soha. Namo Majishriye, Namo Sishriye, Namo Tamashriye.
Yeah.
Good morning, Gen Rinpoche, Tashi Delay. And, and good morning, Katrina. Thank you for your translations. Welcome to people online. Just to let people know that there's been a change of schedule. So today is our last teaching until May 11. We'll take a pause. Genla will take a rest and also do some teachings for Jewel Heart. And then we'll resume on May 11th. So in light of that, we've decided to extend the period of making offerings, if you'd like, and information for that will be in the chat box eventually. And please have a look. So, the deadline is now April 7th. So if you can please try to get your offerings in, and we'll make those offerings to the various people. And we'll begin with some prayers.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one who has gone from destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow, who with pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomplete, one to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field, endow with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Do your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, Let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, this song is.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, Katrina. Oh yeah, the chitsonga bachim be song lero. Oh, ni kare. Kaya song rap kunji nying betas. Kaya song rap kunji nying betas. Kaya tamban nam je ngak pelam. Kenden thande nam je jungwa de chudar no shita ke shebar cha she song bataro. Oh yeah. Kaya song rap jingi chi song ba sa je chum den de song rap jingi chi song ba te changma tham je ge chu Nimbu chu teba ina songara, teba sorab ko nimbu te ninjo dere songara, nebar jongas. Nebar jongas de tari lengeban jongore. Kibu chungyu kapsu tambu ngara zu neban jongsa kara jongore sana. Ngara zu tong dege. Tendu da ro. Oh. Ta tandang usum do tong mate tong mebe. Ene nyawa da ita la soba. Ta doa nge son sumsi ra nge do sumsi. Tendo lata meche, doa de tu yada. O tina ne, kangara zungu sung tong de, tendo la soba te zul pa kena, kange da chik pe, mangbu chi tunge mangbu chi yobata nga zu tong de doa. Chik le chik sawe tunge sa ra, shenji kwe chu che, shenji pa, se tu kari che ne ko lapsa che se kayo mara. Saya kwe, tongya kwe, pakwa kwe, nyingdi kwe, shadi kwe kanga se. Oh, tende te tende tonge to so. Tengu sum tong de tira. Atene si tandangu sum do ma to e. Nyewe tonge lu me chikba la so ba chawe tonge trawe tonge si de lu tene pa kene. Shashe ma bo pe me da ban de pa ke do e tende ta. Ti yuna ta da shi ma tu che ko tonge nyang kwe. Chang nye se ra. Oh, ta tende tonge ma bu she ra. O tendele kena pe nyaga doa ya wumi doa samsa ngevar do tendele balu hachi chegu samsa samlu kogu yara tambu dalya kare sangara so sem yangenge rikchi da sem yangenge rikchi nyi doa shingda toda sala soba tendele yore tizol ke sem ke yomara soa tidu nyaya yomara sa soa tidu nyange dilen dameda mabudo ngara so miri ngusung to dange Tada palala sopa buchunjo le sopa dhamma budwa. Tezo sama ko sem yoge de doa. Sa sem de. Karso de. Sem de lu de le ten che te yora. Lu dhamma wange ane sem de sem se ta riba tang lu ta. Len si temu pa mai ba to si tungbu ha konge da tende keba do doa. O te yende ko ngazo sem de. Kadu yena ko lu dan draw che suna ya shenda che nyamdo. Lu de ya tondo da che da me da nyamdo dosibra te de ngara jo semde phungbo de da me da che li pha da sa le de sa ne je ba tang le ta chi te len shi te mo ba yi ma da tung ye chi jo te zo kang ga yong do nga ranzo samlo soso semde tanda me le tende chungbu da ya bo duwa lang do shenge ya bo duwa ta de tela ma de ya be sem thamo chi chen do ne shenda tende kyora chila to ba chil jawa choso na ane semde nge ma na shi de ma ra sa singa soso semde samsala me le jawa la samsala la do samsala nyawa do tando le che be ku ga shi de le ke tende che yo ga tinga ju sam sora le ku go 제나 아니 다다 미래데 르단 자와체나 카와카와 기도해 돈도르 지께서나 통해 가데가데 로아자루 차도 지께서 가데가데도 무슨 토데에도 소리야 나 텐데레 domise 마데삼 당아라조 데삼부다 가조데 미래 카와카와 토안드레 카야르삼 도데 삼사코라 요마라 때껴나치 삼로타 리다 셈비 자와체야도 삼로타데 Sente lui da menda da ko da cha da wa ti le giti ko go ti de ko ti le nge ba jwa de tambu ke shi sho da ni jo se nge do le nge ba jo ne nge do kya wa le nge ba jo ne ha da mi kya wa se nge ba do to ba che ko do sam te kyo de ga ra se ne sha la cha wa pa mi ke wa de pa pa ke wa tu ge ti re Bombolo do sambuto meke wale tunge ko tishin nyado tamjeto kele tendo tamjeta kele tendo tamjeta namba kundu tewalas tendo ladambe tisura o de tangbutra nijo tangbude kibu chonge nijo de ngazo shizu sa ne zogura tangbu ngazo te samtagura o de si sonya
So here, as Lama Tsongkhapa has said, the essential meaning of the victorious one's teachings, the path praised by all the holy victorious ones and their sons, the gateway of the fortunate ones desiring liberation, this I shall try to explain as much as I can. So here in the first line where it says the essential meaning of the victorious one's teachings, so really this is going to give the essence of the teachings of the Buddha, but here this line is referring to renunciation, and renunciation is something that we first have to develop in relation to the being of small scope, thinking about the kinds of rebirth that we could take. I mean, there are those negative rebirths that we can see, like as animals, but there are beings like hell beings, hungry ghosts. There are these 6 types of beings within samsara, those that are of good migrations, being humans and gods, and those of lower realms. I mean, we can see the animal realm. We can't see the hell realm or the hungry ghost, but looking just at what animals endure in terms of being eaten by one another and the kind of treatment that they endure at the hands of humans, being used for their skins, for their fats, for their meats, without any sort of recourse, right? This is the kind of situation that we could be born into. So here, although we can't see the kinds of sufferings of hell beings, they are described as having to endure great heat or great cold, the kind of suffering of being split into many different pieces. And even at that point, you're not actually like sort of like a lotus opening up, your whole body being split into various pieces and having to experience that suffering without actually dying. You're continuing to be alive. And so looking at those, really contemplating what it would be like to take on such a rebirth, we think, I have to avoid falling into such a state. So we can recognize that there are 2 types of things, we could say. There are those things that have a mind, those that are sentient, and those that are not sentient. So certain things like trees or rocks and dirt and so forth, they don't experience feelings, but anything that has a feeling, a sentient being, we can look around us and see how it is that all of these experience various lives. I mean, we have feelings, the cows have feelings, bugs have feelings, and the mind is dependent upon the kind of body that it takes as a support. So for example, we can see the difference when one's mind is supported by an animal body. You lack the kind of clarity of one's faculties, the intellect that one would have as a human. The sort of power of that awareness is much dimmer. And so we have to recognize that it is possible possible to take up any of these sorts of bodies, any of these kinds of lives. And if we were to, say, be born as an animal, we would be stuck in a form where we lack that kind of clarity of awareness, lack that ability to intellectualize or think about things. So right now we have this sort of human life where we are alert, we are aware, we have those kinds of capacities and faculties. But the mind, when we face death, when we go into death, there will be a subtle continuity that goes on. And that subtle form of our mental consciousness will then take up another birth, sometimes as a human, sometimes as a god, sometimes as an animal, and so forth. But we shouldn't think that when we separate from this body and take on a new support, we are going to sort of get to carry on this a mind that we have as a human, the kind of capacities that we have. Imagine what it would be like to be born as a goat or as a sheep. So we think we sort of have this ability to carry on with our human intellect, but we really need to recognize, we need to have a feeling about what it would be like and wanting really to avoid such a fate in the future. And so we need to have this sense of renunciation or kind of feeling of definite emergence. I have to get out of the lower realms. And what is the method for that? It is abandoning harming others. It is abandoning the 10 non-virtues. As the Master Nagarjuna has said here, all sufferings and the lower realms are a result of non-virtue, and all happiness in the upper realms come as a result of our virtue. So we need, as a foundation for everything, to really have this kind of sense and have a renunciation wanting to avoid birth in the lower realms.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Tenashita, Kibuchungude, Tende Samlo Corne, Ade Tegba Kewa Trune, Yason Lamagiachi. Hada milike kuko shede trune tene tar hada milike na ya samgara kibu chungu de samlo chede ya torora kibu chungu de chungu raje de chembu cha de marwa kibu chungu de samlo te kona o ta milike na ya bode halike ya bode sambarwa tagite hase de ya de jitele debel hal sigyo marda kwa konge ga hatu sigyo da mo le dan yamu bawage Sungam Sungmi and Gamba Latus Kiats, Sigara. Oh, the Ducasser. Oh, Lada Milikena, Niasola to the pay our shot. Diana Lada Mila, Petungema Buduasam, Tunget Sorgivara. Tengal Lada Milikena, I wish I do some Givara, me, Nelu, Longe Kangal, Change Child, Hallekin, Tileja, all Lupusons of one episodes of a large person. Change it, charge there. That is some time today. Tetule Dunga Yora tend to Tende Marwa. Yang Dunga Hala, she to pet Dunga Mabuyora. Luigi Kato to the Yamdo. Lulia Namji Meto Timber to the Nimbacha marriage. Meto Timber to the Nimbacha, Lily Timako. Any Latus Kangatako Shingate his subject log had a shaggy Sarah. Then play message to me, young Sarah. Namji be some Sally Omara. That in this, the Otindico. Tunga Shivaji Yovate, and then Nebake Omar, and the Nego had a million a young, as only kiss it and did it or attained. Had a millikenaya, Tangarazo Hakura, Samutana, give us it to me, your gave it to me, your Naya to me, your Chile to me, your the Vacha the money by Tunga, your Meduba taught the way to me, your Ra Meduba the Tevada, Tajik, Tatile Tarn with Samutana. Kewala ngeba me kabri nyawa ki kabri ti ngomba me lonje pusum soba kaje chena ta drisu se ngomdra dio mara shenja chere dura ngomba me be ngeba se lu yang do torne ra yang do thome de jo ya kyo sangbu chule yang tu gale o tinde chede de hada mela ya tunge ki ran shin chere de twa le da nyom be shawa de chune tunge mabu shin yang gu asire te yara o tiende tele könde twara o ta de ya budemdo ta tele tarwachi chegudo sa rala rawa meba pumbun dolen chene tidu nyongko ba tele tarwachi chegudo samne neba jongyo ara tanda ko ne phusum sawa le phusum sawa loje phusum sawa le shenje chakba de tele semchola de nge jongse lar me do be suji ba o ngone ya budemdo ta samurta ya chena Yeah, so la to de yabushida de yena ko ten de wa kagere me do asam satene. Ani koe dungele tadu ninju ki wara koa lo koya de la. Rang la rawa me ba le da nyomu be wa ge. Kichi chik de chik de kyu de la da mele ke na ya kawa ke na ya dunge ji rang shile ma de wara sha asam. Tile tarwa chi che ku do sam che. Tile ngeban ju ne tenga pa shen ji cha de tile ngeban ju ne. Sheba lo ne ta ngeba to tile tarwa chi che ku do si de. Ta le da nyomu be wa ge. Koa koya tile tarwa chi che ku do sam ge wara. Ti ninju rwa. Koa la ngeba ju ninju si ta. Koa la kor shen je tile. 내가 또 개발하는 마다 포기 가가 중에 당시 제반다다 샤삼 텔레타르고도 삼 네바르도 추죠 파샤자위바데 수 셴발로네 타 네바르도 텔레타치 제고 삼삼부터 기분 랭게 긴종세거라 어디 교회 소로 그 인부터 담보할래 예송기 동에래 네바죠 예송기 교활 되네 코에 교활에 네바죠 아치고 그래서 대중소나 안에 Hada milike da hada milike ne te ya bude bedo asam tharwa thoyagi samluti yongyo ara o te soda tambuchi kare na jiksa cheta chik maduse samlo ko do o te ya bu me do asunde ne tele kyan thong son tele thadu lo ki ra ke ma do ne ma da se ya bu do sam te shanda ko thadu lo ke o mara te de nge jo di peke se bore so gara o ki bu chungi nge jo ke ne ki bu chungi samlo de se thordo ne kibun tengi samlo koale tendo thare samlo thudo ya tijilana kave sora ko yimbi tense de ni junni do ho tishya ya
Mm. So then those kinds of contemplations of the being of small scope, where they say, I want to definitely get out of the lower realms and do so by abandoning non-virtue and engaging in virtue as the method to avoid such a fate. But here, then, the being of middling capacity sort of expands that thinking. They think that, well, being born as a human and a god might be nice in comparison to the lower realms. And here, when we say God, we're not talking about some sort of being that is transcendent, that is out of samsara, but rather a being that takes a birth in that kind of a heavenly realm due to karma and the afflictions. And so, we look at this kind of situation and think, well, oh, those lower realms are suffering. But when we look at our own situation, having been born as a human, we can recognize that we experience suffering. Like we normally are kind of attached to these various pleasures that we get to experience. And out of that kind of clinging to those, we think that this is actual happiness. But even when we begin to contemplate, we can see that taking birth as a human or even as a god isn't stable, lasting happiness. Like we might look at the heavenly realms and think, oh, look at all the pleasures that they get to experience. But at the time of death, for example, a god experiences excruciating suffering. The color of their body sort of fades. These flower garlands that they have had become sort of wilted, and they smell. The other gods sort of keep them to the side, and they know that they're going to have to fall into the lower realms. So even if we are born in one of these upper realms as a human or a god, we experience suffering. We know this from our own experience. We have to go through like aging, we go through sickness, we go through meeting with what we don't want, we go through not getting what we do want, we have to go through the kinds of experiences of uncertainty in that it's uncertain, like all of the things that we think are stable or lasting are going to have to change. We meet with those that we don't want to, we lose the things that we love. Our birth is uncertain, where we will go in the future. We have to sort of cast up and take off new bodies due to the control of our karma and afflictions. There's the suffering of non-satiation. No matter how much good we have, no matter how much pleasure we get to experience, we are going to want more and more of it. And so this is the nature of a birth within samsara, even as a human or a god. It's not beyond this nature of suffering. And so looking at this, seeing the way in which we cycle through samsara under the control of our karma and afflictions, what we are normally attached to, what we normally cling to or think of as pleasure, we see it for what it is, as being in the nature of suffering, and give rise to the sense of, I need to free myself from this cycle. cycle compared to the lower realms. Yes, the upper realms seem nice, but they're still not beyond that kind of nature. They're within this cycle of samsara, wherein we uncontrollably take rebirth due to our karma and afflictions. And so recognizing this, feeling a kind of revulsion for that, saying, I want to get freed from this kind of situation, seeing this, even though from time to time we have a nicer sort of situation, we think that it's a little bit better, we think that it's kind of pleasurable, it's not beyond the nature of suffering. And so we feel this sense of, I need to get out of this, I want to renounce this. And so first we need a sense of renunciation toward the lower realms. But again, expanding our thinking, we can see that, well, even those upper rebirths are in the nature of suffering. So may I definitely get out of samsara. This first line that talks about the essence of all the essential meaning of the victorious one's teachings, it's really getting at renunciation, or this feeling of revulsion, wherein there's something that we fear, something that isn't right. We see the faults of that, and by seeing those faults, we give rise to this wish to be freed from it. So this kind of contemplation, first for the being of small scope, and then for the being of middling scope, going beyond to wanting to get out of all of samsara, is something that is indispensable for any kind of practice.
Oh yeah. Geshe tamba namjinga belams rangibetro. Geshe tamba namjinga belams. Oh, tai kibun dende samlu korne. Koale rani tardu samlu shukchimbuchi korso. Oh, te kortadu. And samlu korgore kibun dende. Tai kibu chembe lamle dugora. Oh, ranchibu tungele targo samsa samlu te kyang samlu ta. Te de medoasam. So dele pama nyandele soba pe cheshi pe yido watin de ora tezu samala samlu che madane so chekboche tare samlu tana maro de shande medusa ranga chende pama nyandele soba bupomola soba karina pe chebo yora konjole che robere che taye tabshi she ya chi do tabshi she uto samsa samlu ko yora Tiko Duza ko Ranchibu Koya Dungele Tana Samrute Digmedusam. Rang Pama Chende Pama Yedela Sobatesu Samako Yara. Te Samlutandi, Chende Chapu Mare Kyongama Namsuyal had a Milake cigarette, Tondulake cigarette, Teta Te Negam Pama than Yedela Sobashanda Shayogura. Tingama Tenda Samlutana. Kyo Toma Mevasonza, Soso Pama than Yede Soso Lupentonge. Chende be English Geshe Pentonge Suna Tele Tinda Majura Simjas Mendoas and De Jure and De Majura Sasa Yomara. Simja Tamja Pada Mada Neda Nidu Kigenda Rock watching a talk with and Tatin the Majuget De Jure Omara says Omara Samgora. Tinda Simja Tamja Pada Matse de Pamanashige. Chipa Rede to awesome Kishifen and Womashim Mata Kyonga Matinga Matingama Kadina Chiyutusa. Tandangora Shena, Shina, Tina Haraskura, Tinishingi Omara, Tanda Kondo says it, Pamse, Kyanga, Pama, the unity to a len. Naji say that the machine ring that. Oh, Casa. Oh, the Simja Tamje, Koya Dungeli Taro Cheku do some, that's simply Kavam do some summer condition, a singing resha some. Pamachibu Maiba Chibu Maiba Simja Tamja Pata Marda Nedo Yidu Rana Cutting Shimbu Majeva Shi and Midu Kishi Pen and Woma Shimbere Matoji, some much about the Shasam. The Simja Tamja Coil Dungele Tarwa Tap Shego do some so when I can't to the Shego do some Gora. Geshe do Chanju Cho to Stem Kiguara. Simja Tamja Ranchibu Taura Tindi Medusam, Takibu drink the Kibu Chambucha Yora. Oh, Simja Tamje Pamar give Simja Tamje. Kohe Dungile Tarwachi Chagu to Osam. Techedo, Atanda Sosa Kaleke, Tanda and Gotsune. Roa, Chanju Simja Tamji, the Tarshaba to get Sanje, Kovanto Wachi do some Gora. Tanda and Simja Tachini to Joanna Yagetan. And the Tarshaba Sanje Kushi and they could never also talk with one. And they send it to Landoki net to get. Oh, send you to get Sanji Kovanto Wachaku some Gora. Oh, tis some yet is something. Nature you some say. Mashi Tede Susa Namjorata Agora. Marshebala so what tables or Tede Samata. 대전에 참제가 되고 some 개발체면도 some 직성을 거기라. 또 팀멤버야 다시 냠제고 샘제시도 대 그때 전부터 상마치버래. 얘나 소소 대완돌을 통해 매도 뒤초한테나시 상말이 오라 섬겨라. 라이 그 대화 참모 동네 참모장에 매도 대화 천주시에 배 초시면 가리는 톱고시 삼루시 오라. 뒤도 그냥 저 겜부 숙점부 지어라. 뒤나시 상말이 오라 섬겨라. 상마 대완돌을 통해 매도 바란다 찍버리 뒤전다 탑시시기 오라 섬겨라. 다시 냠바스 뒤에 담보. 다다 상마 대완돌을 통해 매도 소화된 라라 요래서 나라저 단다 삼로 소소때 동해 참무시에 매고 야구 강가 여 공개를 제신다 가리나 인섬 사다 도에서도 또 콘도선에 사다 도에서도 코카리나 이 소아카리 해마요 같이도 가려섬 바 동해대 탑시시 되거라 오따때도 만들어도 왔섬 소소리아 대완돌을 통해 매도들 시행기 차와신게 존나 건드치 요새에서 기나시 소아 강가 콘도 요라 콘도 사도나시 말이야 삼겨라 어떻게 돼서 다다 시행 참제 대완돌을 통해 매도가 씹어라 아니 라치부 대와대 삼루타 동해대 삼루타 시행달을 차와시 때도 마루라서 요 시행 대완돌을 통해 매도가 냠바로 와서 다시 냠바서라 다 제보자고 그래 다 통만 매번에 라 대완도 통해 매도가 시행 대완도 통해 매도가 다다데 소소데 개체슈치네 라게 동해 대와 투에데 개체슈치네 라체슈치네 아니 시행을 라도 다도를 시행을 사와팅 거라 다 통만 매번에 라 개체슈치지베 제대로 단다바도 개게 도게지마도 야게 총통면도 왔음 다 삼루 땅땅 거라 너도 왔음 버래 통만 매번에 다 시행게 쳐왔지 그래서 라레 시행 시행게 쳐왔지 있지 그래서 라르다 통만 매번에 시행르다 랑게 시슈시 랑 정달 시행 배치지고라 다들 민도사 노샤 삼네 시행게 시슈지 다그 시행제 버스고라 다 시행제 와서 다 통만 매번에 나서랑 개시슈지 성도 파샤 시행 야와도 랑게 시슈지 랑체슈지 시행 야와도 성도 집어가게 삼발다 다 가르치고라 시행 시슈지 랑 시행기 돈도 배치체 야와도 시행기 돈다 랑르 당샤래 다 랑 시행기 돈다 랑르 당시도 파타디 다 시행도 마시마도 요마라 이나 랑게 돈 담발이야 랑게 돈 타르심바데 다 투에 고추고요라 바셈데 콜로 나네 소소탄다 르탄 시행기 삼탄 거라 이나 돈다 ngomal이야 소소탄다 타르심바데 투에 요거라 근데 다시 냠지 거네 샘께와 아세 땡이지 거네 샘께지 심지어 탐제게 더 두게게 그것에 연대 군대기 가사진 교와 자고도 삼 기분 된게 삼로 기분 챔베 삼로 거기도 어야 되지라
So here, this next line then says, the path praised by all the holy victorious ones and their sons. So here we have the kind of contemplation of the being of middling scope, wherein they see this situation of samsara and generate a strong attitude of renunciation. But here we move with this line into the kind of contemplation for the being of great scope, wherein we see that it's not just us who is in this situation of samsara, but rather we look around. All of these beings, like our mother, our father, those that we hold dear, our friends, our family, they too are in this same situation of suffering. And so it's not right to only think about our own aims, our own needs, and not sort of care for those who have shown us great kindness, for whom we feel great affection. They too are in this kind of suffering situation. So here, it's not just, though, that we have the mother and father, friends and family of this life, those that we hold dear. But when we think about the fact that we have taken countless rebirths in the past, going into all different kinds of births, we can see that like the most cherished, loved, like our beloved mother or dear family or friend of this life, so we have had beings that acted in that capacity in previous lives. And so when we look around us, given that we have taken those countless kinds of rebirths, other rather than not recognizing it, right? We moved from life to life, but it isn't the case that any being has not acted in that capacity as like one being for whom we feel great affection. So yes, we have moved and changed lives, but it could very well be the case that someone who was our dear mother of a past life is the person that we're getting angry at right now. So here, it's not as though we should think about just sort of me and our own aims, but again, recognizing the kindness of others and recognizing that they have all acted in the capacity as our kind in that sort of position in the past. We should say to ourselves, I'm going to do as much as I can for them. And so this, again, is going into the kind of attitude of the being of great scope, wherein we see that others' suffering matters to us, that we want to be able to alleviate their suffering. And so therefore we start to make an effort toward that goal, toward working for the benefit of all sentient beings, doing at the present however much we can to be of benefit while continuing to improve and develop our mind all the way until we get to that state of Buddhahood in which we have removed all faults and developed all good qualities and have the capacity to know the various dispositions and inclinations of other sentient beings and teach them, lead them in accordance with their needs. So we can develop this kind of attitude of bodhicitta based upon the sixfold cause and effect method of recognizing that all beings have acted as your mother or whatever kind being and wishing to repay that kindness and so forth. And so recognizing the kindness of others, this is a very important kind of way of developing our interest in the suffering of others. But when we also then look at other sentient beings, we can see, well, in the same way that I have this kind of natural wish to be happy and wish not to suffer, like we all naturally have that. We have this sort of sense of like, may I have all of the good things, may nothing bad whatsoever happen to me, may I not have to encounter even the slightest suffering. We see that all other beings are sentient, right? They are not like dirt or stones or something wherein they don't have feelings, but they have that exact same sort of feeling that we have. This is what we call the equalizing of self and other, wherein we recognize that those around us are not inanimate, unfeeling beings, but rather have the exact same desire to have the best, to be happy, to not have to suffer. And so recognizing that they are just like me, we see that it's not okay to cause them harm, right? It's usually when we are sort of only focused on our own aims. Well, I need my happiness, and we disregard the kind of feelings that others have, that we are violent against them. We cause them harm in that way. But when we can recognize that they are just like me, actually, it's not okay to hurt them. It's not okay to cause them pain. And so we can see that, well, up until now, I've really been pursuing my own aims alone, putting myself first, thinking of myself as more important. I've been doing this since a beginningless time, but I haven't really been able to achieve anything for myself. I haven't achieved my own aims. I'm still in this kind of situation. And so rather than continuing to pursue this kind of selfish objective, we see that it's mistaken, actually, to just pursue our own aims and cherish and value those and not care about others, neglect and not think about them. We can see that this is mistaken. This has not brought us any sort of good results, but rather if we were to exchange those kinds of attitudes in which we value the needs of others, see their aims as important, and sort of neglect our own as we would have previously neglected the needs of others, we can see that actually when we pursue solely the benefit and welfare of other sentient beings, we end up accomplishing our own benefit and welfare by the way. We've given that up, we've sort of renounced that, but we end up in that pursuit, perfecting our own aims as well. And so this sort of a contemplation of the being of great scope, or how we move into that, is by recognizing that we ourselves are so intertwined with others, dependent upon their kindness, and really we need to pursue their aims in order to bring our own to perfection. And so we have this feeling of, may I become a Buddha, one who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities, in order to be able to work for the welfare of all sentient beings.
Oh yeah. Tene ta thamba te tira ka. Tese tamba namingol. Kenden thad nam je jongo te sera. Tharma Tobalaya, Rangi Tabato, Nada, Shensin Jetamji Tabalo Guyana, Tharma Tobalaya, Lamcho, the Juba, Geshe the Karesina, can they Tando Namjin Jube, any Cho the Jubate, Yanda Betawa, Takshe, Tanya that Umetawa said, Tombani said, oh, Kasha. Can they Tando Namjin Junga days? Oh, the Tombani Toga, Takshe, Tanya that. 동반이 또 그람들에서 대가르스나 단단하라도 참말 가르삼고 저도 나 저도 라와도 삼고도 땡에 속보래 땡에 저라데 이제 나데 tel야 배주 생게데 저 원주 생게데 나로 여번에 직시 삼고도 디나시 뚝다마 마보 텐데시거라 나게 집에 기부세 나로 여게 딱지 라와 생기 다세라 She used your some giver, Nagarjuna something to Rao touch you something. Or tell it any as any I lose in all Shinja Shuchimbuchora, any I lose, I shiji, any Nachoda, Shenshota, Ral Koyata, Neguya to Cap the Chai, the Shenshota, Tayanani Shendo, she Takshan Challenge in the Tansera. Any Dasha, anything I get on a mirroring a Mika me now, which is Taya Yamamushi Yora. Chunju Kanga Yo much dead so matter. Chunju Yashara. Oh, Conduci, oh, Natuchi, as you say. Chagdang is some of the Ake. Chagdang is some of the Jedus and a Chagba Wagi. Cabricale, Sagre, Miguel Sagre. Condu Angit that Miguel Mado Kawasai de Keomara. Chagdang is Shawan Yur, and the land of Medasa, Tiwangi Quaco de Ora. Tin the good Chagbe usage, say, Nalakoya Chagbe used to do any round which you don't want. Round the Shuchi you have some Koyara. Chagbe you did. When they said that, Tatamber Samutana, Nature Samutana, saying other round and young and some local and I sit and by Omar, tending at your Marisigora. And then I lose a Shenja Jesada. Chagba Jessaga Shito. You rang when I round at Tangi change, you don't want to bet near your village. You couldn't when you don't want Shenja Chever, some Koyara. Kondo Sasajane, oh, call some bet the Yido Meoa, you couldn't when you do Meoa, Tarta Conget some Koyara. Tende Maresigora. You don't want the social of a Tagura Mansha. Chashe does the damage of Mabuchi to Tom Shaggy, you are the mother to Janja Sashayora. Tatina Nechitu, Tomze, Social Fachita, Shadin, Yabushi, Sha some giver. Doja de Doja Samutan, the condition, or make it the pet Doja rest a condo, subject some Shuk Chimbukoyadova. Yako Tawaris in the calling ever your mother. There's an Kogumareko. Miko was a noisy on the chichen. Don't the chichen could not get to chat and yet some Mashi Kemukia, the Doshak today. You can go to Condosayachina, Kidea Condosagora Conamsa. Tindege, or Tesotan, or coaches to us. Tended in the chair as a social Tagoda. Lefa Mata Vecability Yungumado, Condo Yungmara, Shinja Yungmara. You're on to bet Yungu in the corner, Lutan and the Madana, the Kadina, Shinja de Yogura. I would tend to do some sort of tangled segment. So, Shashel ten Patagiora, social log. Nade pa tenetawas. Tate o de Uma Tavenalia, Tenji de Barjoma, Secation, but etc. Luge Chasha, Semge Chasha, Mabu, Chode, so much of the order. Pojo Chayu de Sida. So much of the order. Tell it then any source of about the Yabushi, some Shenji Chawa. Lokigora. Ta yu rangwene chi yu na kagire sene pine tse chi nye chi yu gore te yu ma re. Nga se de tagre. Tande namgyu nga zu pecha ne sungu doa. Taji chawa tuji sem se. Kira nga sam rawa chi yu be sam lu khudi tuji sem da. Rang lewa kengi chi shu de re sungu da. Taji chawa tuji sem chone tagre. Duchi pungbu di tong de se. Sopo yu sa dinda dili ya rangwe da dinda chi yu ma re da se kira sa tongba re da se. Tela semje rangwe nga chi yu ma re sungu da. tell us something, my Pechan Sunguda. Chitariana Sonamla tennis in the Chiva, the Tishi Pumbunam, the Nekundu Samsis. Pumbunga, the ten pa lupa, Tariora. Lawyer Wang Pa Shani, I would do to would do spa shower. You could have chicken when it's so round that in the Chivana. That Kagidesi. And it's said, and you got to Tombani Shedi give us some chuma, Mimilumin Namgamisana, Sulu Chashakana Mare, Soa de Mare, and Dushi de Mare, Kondo de Mare, Naje de Mare, Trado de Mare, Teso de English your mother. The Tesol Paten at Tapas. Le ten at Tapa, Tension de Varjoy. Tension de Varjoy. Tension del de Nipa, to Tremabuso, which is Susifa Le Tagiore. Take a reader and chili to Seke Mare. Chasha Mabuzil ten Patagora, Rangun a mess, Round to Tuba mess, Rangshingi mess, Ranging oil mess. Or tended that Tombani de Samuya Bush Tabina. Ne chagwe yu nga korang te nabgyune rawa me, ane nga ye chagyu yi do wang ta me wang tuzo rawa tu chuwa me, su le fa tene takwa samre sa. Tide samlu tang na ne kondo da nga je dang chato yumu tuzo ma shido yo ra, yumu ku tsawa de tang zin ti ro. Chagdang la soba yumu yumu, chagdang yumu me na ane le sa yu na ko keba seba kuwa leba se, le la su tam kegi yumu ti me na kewa le kewa ma ra. Otamangas ran to do the
So here then in this third line where it says the gateway of the fortunate ones desiring liberation. So here, whether we desire just our own liberation or we seek to liberate all sentient beings from suffering by achieving the state of Buddhahood, we need to have this correct view, the view of the middle way view, the view of emptiness. And so this is a view that is free from the kind of extremes of permanence or reification and nihilism. So most of the time we have this sense of there being like an I. We feel like there is this autonomous sort of independent thing, being, and we have like my body, and these are my things. I'm using this body as though there were some sort of like controller within this set of aggregates and was the possessor of those. I mean, we see various non-Buddhist tenet holders in particular hold to there being some sort of a permanent, unitary, autonomous self there, right? And we hold to that so strongly. We have this idea of I, and we kind of cling to that, and then my body, and we extend that out to things like, oh, these are my people, like my race, these white people or these black people. We have these kind of sense, even from being very small, we are as humans, we tend to make this sort of us and them, so that from very young we make these kinds of distinctions, and so under the control of that kind of ignorance, when we think of there being this sort of I or mine that is autonomously, independently existent, we then give rise toward to attachment towards those that are on our side and a kind of animosity toward the other. And in this way, this fundamental like perception, the thing that we are, say, attached to, we cling to it as being sort of existent in and of itself, autonomously from its own side. And so the kind of the way in which this is again, there isn't an I that exists in the way that it seems to us. We feel like there is this sort of autonomous, independent I that has like, this is my body. And really, when we have that kind of sense of clinging to it as existing from its own side, right? Like the object of attachment, we think that it exists from its own side, independent of our mentally labeling it as being something that is pleasurable. And so too with the thing that, say, is our enemy, this thing that we don't like, the object of our anger, we see it as being like that from its own side. side. It's over there without being mentally labeled or mentally designated. But of course, this is not how these things actually exist. Like we have this sense usually, if it were the case, say that person that we see as in this kind of negative light, that is a bad person, and we have that kind of a sense, then it should be that whenever we interacted or encountered them, we should have that sense of them being bad. But say we don't recognize them, we might actually end up like laughing with that person. It's our mental labeling, right? That is, oh, that person is bad, that then causes all the rest to happen. And so here, when it comes to the way in which we do this, we engage in this kind of process of mentally labeling, mentally designated. There's a collection of parts, and we say, oh, it is this, right? And this is where we get into the importance, particularly for the Madhyamaka, this idea of phenomena as being dependently originated, having this kind of way of being dependently designated. We think that there is something like out there, but the way that this really works is there's a collection of parts, and we mentally label it, mentally designate it. Oh, it is this, right? But if it were the case that there were something that existed as such, we should be able to find it, to point to it within that basis of designation. But there isn't anything that we can actually find there. So here it is said that this mind that thinks I, that thinks of the self, this is really the mind of Mara, or the mind of a demon. We sort of hold to these compounded aggregates as if it were like an actual self there. And there is a self that is designated by thought, but not in the way, it doesn't exist in the way that we it appears to us to exist. So here, if we were to search within that basis of designation, as the verse that came earlier, the person is not earth, not water, not fire, not air, not wind, not mind, yet not apart from any of these could we find such a self. So there's no single thing that we can point to. Again, these phenomena are dependently originated, dependently designated. They lack any kind of inherent existence from their own side, autonomous, independent sort of existence. And so when we come to this kind of a recognition that, say, the object of our attachment doesn't exist from its own side inherently like that in the way that it appears to us, or the object of my animosity doesn't exist like that as it appears to me, this has the power to pacify our afflictions. This kind of understanding of phenomena as being dependently designated, interdependently originated, helps to pacify our afflictions, and the full realization of emptiness eliminate them entirely.
Oh yeah. Oh, that the Tongbanyeti, Shedizam, Sapso Chekoya Mamboyaton. Oh, the Dungumulu to get Sugua. Tenjin Debre Joanka, Tene Tongbany to shares. Mabo Kandachi in Arwa. Mambo is torn and teletan Kungo to Gurmato Chief Tom Megune. Koran Janga Chibujanga to Chief Chen to Yamara. Mabo Karina. Kansa Hinanda, Kambuta Hinanda, Namdu Hinanda, Kanga, Shitama, Kamba Hinanda, Zabuli Hinanda, Kaga in the Chibade. Mambo's horn, Teletana, and then Namdu Resa, de Mire Sara, de Zabuli Resara, de Casa, I pay Resara, Major Tashara. Titash de Tina Legaching Mambo or a Chasha Mambo. Teso re ke de yomara de ai pe re sai chi yomara ina konzo re lega che de te lega che bol share mi chi la be chi shu so no o ko shu so se gra la bo na so o ko na gi sha go ra sa te ne ta ba sam ji da yo re ti du nyong ge chi yo ra ka she na ba da ke ling mar so ta ta wa ne be be so ti si ta me na ne thar ba ka shi she wo sa je ko ba to be ka shi wo Tewa tanda tunge tanda se. Titu nyonge wara, chi nyonge doa, sobo na lagwa na nga nage se doa. Naya shora, tenda takwa samjire, lagwa ke nage marwa, nga marwa. O tena she. Namdu ravijine chashe re lega chenge mambu yora, konzo lega chi wara. Ti re lega chi bada namdu lega chi bada shago toa, chao chi doa. Chile Gensha, number Gensha Sigma. Conamdu Mara, Chijan, number Mara. In a Kanga, so well at 10 and the number days, and the number period Kanga charging a shadow. Computer in a tinner legacy, Mambo, or the desert legacy, the tiller. Tobal at 10 parta, the computer legacy of a shadow. That Tension Deber Joaka, Tenet Tomba, Shara, when it tomba the Esora. You know, your mother was no mere Maratas, Tenet talk about some shower, Esse. Jidanga Tanya, Chiglatania, Ditchis, Lapsona, Chasha Mamut Sobacilitan Patagi or the Chasha legacy of the Tekoran legacy of the Shagora. Tension Deber Joas on the Chasha Nevada. Chawash and get Shagore. Tomba near the Chawash and get man and like our man to Carsu. Make our man a Kaiman, Chawash and get him have Shara. At the end, you Shimbuda. Chanju some that to the Carsu Shew, Shequa, Tondaromana. Oh, the Tomban is to do that. Tames do Rama Tames. Number time even do this or this, Ramwin to Betame, Taji Ramas in the Tame. Pumbul attention Betame. Then the dog was some guitar or mother, and it takes a Shequa Keromara. To enjoy it and see the Watoya at the young matter, or tea and some Shakwa. Well, this is one.
So here, in explaining emptiness, we have to take some caution. As the Master Nagarjuna has stated, whatever is dependently originated, that is empty. That is explained as emptiness. So here, when we talk about emptiness, we shouldn't think that that means just like something is utterly non-existent. Again, it doesn't exist in the way that it appears, but that doesn't mean that there is like say no self at all. So when Buddhists are called proponents of selflessness, it isn't that they assert that there's no self whatsoever, but there isn't, although there isn't a self that exists from its own side. When we hear say empty, it's empty of that kind of inherent existence. But it's not that those things are utterly non-existent, whether we're talking about like a person or a computer or a plane or a house or the world. On the basis of a collection of parts, we then designate with a name. We mentally label, oh, that's a person, oh, that's a computer, oh, that's a plane. And when all of the various parts within that basis of designation function and work, we can say like, oh, the plane is fine, the plane is working. But if we were to say look for the actual sort of thing, like for example, if someone hits you with their hand, if they slap you with their hand, you would say, oh, he slapped me. Well, it isn't the case that his hand is him, but we can speak about that being the case in terms of the way that things function as dependently designated. So here again, when we say that Buddhists propound selflessness, it isn't that there is no self whatsoever, but that it is a dependently designated self. So when we like, for example, posit that we aren't undermining functionality in the way that things work, the fact that karma accumulates and will bring forth results and so forth. Like when we say, oh, you know, my hand hurts or I hurt, and the hurt is in your hand, it's not as though we can point to where that exactly is. We can find the thing and bring it forth, but yet you're experiencing pain. And so each, like for example, when a plane flies, all of the various parts are doing their work, and say one part has a problem, and then we would say, oh, the plane's broken. Well, the plane is not that single part, but it is on the basis of the functioning of those parts that this plane can function. So without going to an extreme of kind of nihilism, we can say that phenomena are empty of existing from their own side, but are merely dependently designated. So here, if it were the case that you know the self were completely non-existent, what would be the point of teaching any of this? What would be the point of talking about liberation or talking about compassion for other sentient beings? Why would we want to generate bodhicitta for the benefit of other sentient beings? And so Buddhists assert selflessness as in there's no self that is existent from its own side, independently, autonomously, but rather that there is a dependently designated self. And within that process of dependent designation, all actions are functional.
Oh, yeah. 다 돈다고 가르치고 그러잖아. 되게 가르쳐라. 말아도 샘데 남부탄데 셰데 가르치고 그랬어. 샘게 삼로 땅다데. 뭐 고랑 내주 아주 나와나 시 정말 템버티나 신이버에 삼대기 매라. 그절이야 딱제 제제네 봐. 시제 내주디 내주 원에들 가리나 대신고도 다 생겨데 가리래. 나와. 있는 거 이동안 명화다 가리나 터서 내주 원에들 봐. 셰지도 삼로 땅고도 와. 샘le 삼로 땅에 탑도 시름 니가 되러. 삼로 상배 차들래 봐야 제타야. 잠바니 지서서. 시럽 예차되는 병원에 내준 거네 가리나 대셔봐시야. 어때 삼루타네. 그나가지고 가서래. 단대도 삼루타네 상계 딱배 셴체 버서. 심지어 탐제 또 삼루타네 텐데스다 요야요 말을 수치토부터 삼삼 삼기도 와. 이나 셈코란데 네버데 빼 셈코란랑 신데 가서래. 어서와서라. 셈비랑 시 어서와 저만 남들 루브로 와셔라. 셈비랑 시대 세베랑 신체지래. 뒤도 줘봐 단다 되나신 사토나 시대요 말아 코베 뒤도 마두게지 저절에 땡겨요 뒤도 마두게 세베랑 시체지 셈비랑 신 외사와 콘도가제 차도 안전세 메시베 몽바도 루버로 하래 고장만 서나 코베 야야야를 줘요 하래 세계처럼 줘요 하래 사를 줘요 하래 콘도 매버 써요 하래 나제 매버 써요 하래 총을 줘요 하래 자 셈르 상배 차대 탑게 차 잠반이 세대 야제탄 요래 내로 셰베 시럽지 찬 뭐베 내주 치매친 셰데 신통에 요래서라 그래 셰바 코나데 단외랑 시제데 유신경게 세외랑 시전지래 디페주 야부 제통나 나 정말 신경게 뭐베 네바 용수 쪽봐 뭔가 강가 되니 베 강가 야부 신통게 남바 탐제 제베 실린 조르주 요래서라 딩아 저 셈리 샤오라 엔테사 투텐더치네 코치단데 잠불이나 사다 도다 신다 때도 추도 생게면도 이네 때는 투텐도 페이지션에 거대 코르디 아버스도 담면데 소야도 니바 쳔부시든데 소야도 투텐리아고 견데 파세 때나 때치 야와로 치치도자 때나 생각 저 셈데 텐데 요라 자 셈비 네바데 셈코라 당마에 봐 남가랑 시 당와라 진다 투텐 티chen 요거를 마 당와를 시도 빼샤가 남지 디나신 추랑신 요로네 그비 티치르데 랑신 때 당마마도 요파시르 되어 말아 디나신 셈을 껴요데 티베 껴데 그 랑신을 쇼네 카간 로마도 텐데 말에서거라 카간 로야 요데서 빼는가서 미 콘도 사버지나 따버리서 서베 콘도 님이 삼을다 서베 편 삼을다 또 요양님마다 뭐라 로야 때 가서 무슨 쪽도라 그 가제 공부 대삼이 고야게 줘요 봐. 심시하대. 대선다. 심시한 탐제를 산계지랑 신유세. 요. 심시한 탐제를 산계지를 유세. 그래서 강가야 텐데 야른 요래세. 가리 두자네 테랄 때데 테랑 신시네 텔을 주주면 텐데 말에세. 속상권에 터쳤다. 저거 산계 좀 된데 망부여. 대저기 숨겨서 초월에 내로 터도 생겨 용거는 지대 감을 깝깝이야. 가 속상권에 터졌다. 디신이 메시다. 산계기 투님만 그러시 못다. 나라도 sem게 내로 때다. 산계기 sem낼 찍어요래. 지대 배주 야보시니 야르신 버리 지대 배시 만나셔도 두시 때더라. 디신이 메시다. 리유체나 루체그 따도 산계니 무시하시. 산계 리그데 산계에다 뮤직 찍버리 sem비랑신 외사와도 찍어요래. 자 고소소 야제 땅마다 레데요라. 어디인데 하여튼 조르 미세바 말에 근데 조르세바래 어딘가서 근데 로도께 오라 두자에나 두자 다가라 대고 있으면 가셨던데 상가서 지금 말 근데 멤버도 소소를 봐 이거데 샘티 자체 무시 뭐데 디실라데 된 되게 뭐다스다 야
So here, the mind and our way of thinking, we can develop our wisdom by not just sort of accepting the way that phenomena appear to us, but actually beginning to examine that. Is that actually the way that it exists? And so we need to use our mind in the proper kind of a way, because our mind has an incredible potential. We need to think about the way that phenomena actually exist. We need to develop our wisdom and that side of it, as well as developing the sort of side of goodness, the method side, trying to develop within our mind things like love and compassion and so forth. And so then there's the side of wisdom, of actually using our mind to investigate the way that things are, their actuality, the way their reality. And we have the capacity, we have the ability to use our mental faculty in that way, such that we can, again, develop that side of like goodness, the method side, our wisdom side as well. Is dependent upon the mind. When we think about the nature of mind, the mind is clear light. It isn't something that is like atomically, materially existent. It is non-material. It has this nature of being like luminous, of being clear and knowing. And yes, we have these kinds of stains in our mind, but they are adventitious. They are temporary. Things like jealousy and our attachment and our pride and our anger and so forth. We actually have the capacity to reduce and to remove those. They aren't like sort of integral to the nature of mind. They haven't penetrated the nature of mind, but yet the nature of mind is something that is, again, clear and knowing, is sort of luminous. We can remove all of that lack of knowing, that nescience. We can remove all of those kinds of stains and obstacles. And this is like, the mind, again, is not something that is material, that is atomically established. But if we look at the kind of material world and the things that they are able to do with atoms in terms of refining those kinds of materials in order to be able to use them in different ways, think about like the sort of the capacity there. And then we look at the mind, and the capacity is even greater in terms of our ability to separate out those sorts of faults. We have the ability to change. And this is something that we can see directly for ourselves. Like if someone is really angry and they begin to think about the defects of anger, they think about the benefits of patience, that kind of contemplation begins slowly to change the way that they act. We can directly establish this for ourselves. And so all sentient beings have this nature of Buddhahood, have this like Buddha lineage. It isn't as though we don't have that kind of capacity, that we are, well, I'm a bad person and I'm just never going to be able to change, but rather, as it is said, the nature of mind is clear light. And this is something wherein we can see that the sort of enlightened activities of perfect Buddhas pervade all, are all pervading, pervade everywhere. There are times when, through the power of the Buddha's blessings, we are sort of spurred on toward virtue and so forth. And then it says that the sort of nature of the Buddha's mind and our mind are no different, in that their mode of abiding, their sort of actual nature, our own mind is no different from a Buddha in terms of its nature. The difference depends upon the kind of effort that we have made. And obviously a Buddha has made the effort to develop their mind to its fullest capacity, but it's not as though we don't have that potential within ourselves. So we need to develop a kind of confidence, a kind of assuredness in ourselves, based upon recognizing that this mind has incredible potential. We have the potential to develop all the way to Buddhahood. We shouldn't see that as something that is an impossibility.
Oh yeah. Oh, that on that tuition tire. So sem saru taeta. She yar taeta sosoliti yohra. Sosola bayora. Tede namjune tani dagen goen de shane sushin gondur. Le dangemba chebala tani dag pangbuis. Sangbo dangemba karchik do tan soso semde sangbo chata. Shengi chanye들 갈갈도 소소소소 따도체 야체 당고스무라 걔네 당이 다근 거 소소 건접 소소 시에도 그래 건접 현대 때에 요 말을 쓰고라 타조 전에 소소를 알래도 제고에도 소소를 알래요라 다게 저 다게 지시들을 줘 레당에 버제발 당이 다 방부에서 소소소소랑도 가르치도 상보당 해바당 Maybe never the timber than with the culture, so touches and ya can dry. So simply, ya get tango at the end. Oh, catch and butcher, so catch and butcher, shake with it. Culture shake with so simply. They are what you did, you should have done. So should have done, so Namju that Tato Chane, I get dry, but the Kota Shusara. Think as you shall and Namju Raja in a Tagasha said. Congress of the Chino, Congress of the Yane, some good and their Congress of the Tangache. Or the Kasura. Or the day never chamber you, so good job to this or the Tirate. Or they do that on the Kasura. Kibuchonguta, Nijo Kibuchonda, Dinda Nijo. And they Chaju Semba, Chaju Sembla Soba. Or Tazula, Lord Rimji Chane, Marazo Kokasoda. Yagen dry Yovash, Tabata, Samba combustion, Rimji, Yagen dry unit, Tadu Sanje, Koban Toya Yosam, or Tetovechedo, and then any Chani Tabata, Samba combustion, so similar Sambutan, Shen Vichadi, Konde Kondi Yatevacha, teacher to Chun Yaginsam, Koluset and the Samba shoes, I do that.
So, in brief, it's really important that we see our own mind as important. We see ourselves as important and make the effort to make our mind better and better in terms of that side of goodness, as well as to develop our wisdom more and more. Like as the Buddha has said, you are your own master. Like I am my own master and own protector. There's no one else that can do that for you, and you are your own witness to the virtue and non-virtue that you have done. So no one else is going to sort of be able to protect you other than yourself. So here, this is really getting at the fact that you are important and that you have the ability to change, to develop the mind more and more. So if you sort of give up from the beginning, saying like, oh, I'm just an angry person and I'm going to stay angry. I'm just jealous and I'm going to stay jealous. Then you're not going to be able to change, right? But we have the ability, if we make that effort, to be our own protector, to be our own master. And so in terms of how we generate these kinds of things, it is by working with our own mind, beginning with a kind of attitude of renunciation, of the being of small scope and middling scope and so forth, developing this kind of attitude of bodhicitta and a realization of emptiness. We should have this sort of sense that like I have the potential to improve, to develop, and I'm going to make the kind of commitment to, by listening to these teachings, try to put them into practice. And eventually I myself will become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So here, let's set a motivation particularly grounded in the kind of potential of our own mind.
This one.
Yeah, do so.
Oh, yeah, Tama today. Oh, yeah, Sholokakare. Nishtagu
Dari.
Thabkhe and Yeshe. So go to yeah, order. Tandere doa. Oh, yeah, that's so. Tanibalashi, Shera. Order, Thabkhe. Wangji Kabarsha. Ta Wangju Chengengi. Umbuda Tende Kabacha to tune. Koko rest doa. Wang Chengengi. Don't put up to Koko Yara. Or take away the kitchen doa. Oh, the Tamu the Karasana. Koyate, Nistagura. Shebe Saturday, Tatted Tara. Shebe Kenshin Risawas, Ra Riba Shela, Tiglan Zemse. And they got a Nanshe Guba Tongjurba, Mambutado, Chuji. So, yeah, that made the country over the Senate. Wangji Kabacha, Wangji Gengi, Kabacha and Lumbola Sobates Bakogura, Kosashi Ura, did they indeed say. Take condition Congress and a Shebe Kenshin Rix and Asigua, or Kabacha, taking days of Kokura. Take on any Chebe Cheva, Yawaja Makuna, Cheba Cheva to the Cheba Masha. Cheba Chambuche, Melvin, Cheba Chambuche, the Yanga Yorese. Then the typical Chambuche Coco de Esura. Oh, yeah, good. Rikbata, Mirikbashi, Rikbata, Mirikbapa, Shiba, Shiba, Kade, Kapkumagu, Yawashin Gangi, Rawa, Genshin, ko Yamyo Yang, Tosu Yam, Kambachkora, Savasanya Kona, ko Yamyo Mana Kawara. And Ringenasa, O Yami, Chichidan de Rik Tomegi, Rik Chivara Tisigumara. Ya Rik Tometi Jora. Michidana Rico Sambo, Rapsing, Rik Tindeco, Mado, Mi Trouble Tinde Rite, Udio Maresigora. Ringena Nila, Tamba, Sa Mejobe, Risawadas, Oti, Lega to the tentative Sigma Rese, Risambo in the Cocorese. Geneca said, Shebe Kenshi, Risawa, say, Jedua, Rishi, Ribeshela, Tigla Jimse, Rimari Lando Yawushin, any Sawala Jingaji, Tibacha, Jibashi, Zemgaji Quade, Tigla Zemgashi, Sawatarwa, any Tigla Zemdeswa, Tigla Zem, Geneca, Nanshi. Kuba Tongjura, Nalo Milia, Bombota Suba, Tumbuko gets quara, Mili Tumbuchin gets quara. Oh, condition now she. Oh, thank you, Lula. God is a real Sawata, Jide, Gilu, Ribashela, Tilan Zambada, Wang Jin and Wang Chen get Penzulia, Nalola Chambuda Tendeko Yara. Timbi Chawa de Chebe, Kuba Keberis Tor, Jura, Mambo. Tado Chuji. Oh, Tendicasura. Oh, Kutende Lega Yabu Cheshing Tenzu Kokures. Kushishigua. Do medita. This one. Tonjurwa. And then Mambo. Tado Chuji. So, Tendezi me Yabu Kokures. Tendua Ya, Tidlam do that.
So here then, picking up in the text, we are going to be picking up with verse 329. And this is dealing with, and here there will be various topic headings, but we're still sort of in this section dealing with appointing various ministers or advisors. And so here this is talking about gathering sort of special, those that govern well, or those of special sort of power. So here it reads then in verse 329, may you always be accompanied by many advisors who are mature in knowledge, of good family, well versed in public policy, afraid of misdeeds, not contentious, and able to see what should be done. So here, if you were to appoint ministers or advisors who are not sort of special power or special kind of skills, then they might end up putting out punishments for those who shouldn't be punished, and not punishing those who should be. So that will cause a kind of decline in terms of the law of the land and so forth. And so first, they should be again, of this kind of special power and knowledgeable in terms of what is right and not right. And so having some kind of, I mean, the actual word is sort of elderly, but really it's referring to, as it says here, mature in knowledge. If you appoint someone who has no experience, who is totally new to this, it's unlikely they will be able to carry that out well. And here, where it says of good, and literally it's like lineage, this is not necessarily looking at the sort of like higher and lower in terms of like a caste system or something like that, but from someone who is from a good background in terms of having good qualities within them. And so that then is a quality that they should have, as well as being knowledgeable in terms of worldly affairs or public policy. And they should have harmony among them, not being sort of contentious. So when you have the boss and various workers, there should be a degree of cordiality or harmony among them. And then here, the last line says, and able to see what should be done. So based upon having those kinds of knowledges, they should be able to see what is necessary in terms of various actions to take. And then it says, like, that is who you should appoint as advisors.
Oh, yeah. Don't you run it so I don't them who is tell you, then there is some good share to run it so I don't them who is, Katrina Tim Conde Tango in a shandal so I don't them who is. Oh, Delacardos in a severe chase some good is. Me to where about only two Karina, Chamba the Seveconeco, chase some good mother, Condo down at the Tubutango some certain day, send it sometime your mother's ora. Teachable, Cabardo, Tibet subchambering and made Bedoga, some time I don't get Tezula, Labato and Yujichene, Koyago and Tapsi would answer or a mother. Come to the Shas, Yavarton, Yukshan, account to set in this year, Marcera. Tibetable like Cabardo Ying Javar Shower. They tabat and the check with you say. Tibetable to the Cabardo Ying Javar Chakwe, Sanjeta to the son to us, the Tedu was what Tabas. 다 당보들아 당보들 가르쳤으나 제외 송화를 잡아서 미투잔답을 침례 두고에 간가데 제외 권에 따고 그랬어. 어디 가르성도세나 왕제바 남제 시대되나 체바 송다서 왕신게 저거 내배 노르지 체발서 봐 어떤데 방부 겸내 좀 소야다 근데 지금 말해서 버려. 체바기는 노르기 잘라 마무츠 거에서는 체마 대샤 마무코에 팀릭 소야요다 어떤데 맞으세요. 원체바 남제 노르기 체바다. 전도 소화다. 대발라 소바. 지다르 리버체나 어디고 팀다 팀바체네. 야부지 셔고 그래서 그라. 되냐야. 리버 교제 메게 되셔. 시다 렉바리 체나야 시다라 시다 렉바 체나야 렉바 켜게 미게데서 어디다 고전을 줘야다 또 가르쳐구나 또 제대로 넘보다 거 샤베 메디 제쪽으로 그러나 그도 돈데 제거요 말이셔라 개버려 켜게 가서래 미게데서 균인지 렘바리 케네니 슈나서 심지어 당분에 콘도 따도데 콘도 다 독자들 삼사든데 마서자 다고 교라치 땅고리 야오르를 지나서 근데 닝지 제수소에 관해 제고를 해서라 닝지 렘버 기내서 기내니서 슈나 동아다 다고베 겨버버 세자 공다시 슈 야부제 고 교와 친샤 삼산도나 네 전에 땅고를 해서라 배 체준의 체코라 전에 주에도 되세요 말서라 슈나 동아서 다도 제수 소원아 저시에서 가지이나 제외 제수 소원에 텐심체워도 맞아 콜베 간나나 제요 말서라 되기도 아야 야 어디서
So then next is this topic of making oneself compassionate. I'm talking to the king about how they should be loving or compassionate. And this has three different topics. First, how one should carry out activities, holding them with compassion. So even in the case of saying having to imprison or punish someone, one should do so with a kind of loving attitude. And then how, in particular, those who have done non-virtuous actions are sort of a special object of compassion. And then the sort of the reasons for that, or why that is logical, looking at how the Buddha has spoken about this and so forth. So here, as it says then in verse 330, even if they rightly fine, imprison, or corporally punish wrongdoers, you, always being moistened by compassion, should show kindness to those punished. So here, this is specifically talking about those who transgress the law. One should view them with love, with compassion. And so, first of all, one shouldn't those who are actually going to carry out these kinds of punishments shouldn't levy excessive fines against people, nor sort of excessive jail time or corporal punishment, but should be done according to the laws. It shouldn't be sort of, and it shouldn't be the king himself who actually carries that out, but rather the ones that you have appointed, those various ministers and so forth, should carry out those kinds of the implementation of those punishments. And as the king, your continuum, your mind should always be moistened by compassion, such that, say someone has made restitution, has made an apology, you should allow them to get out and so forth, rather than imprisoning people, punishing them, fining them out of anger. It should be done out of a kind of sense of, how can I help this person to improve? What can we do to make this a better person?
Oh yeah. 다시 올라가 좀 소치 되마. 니버 틱바 제발라 학바도 싸워셔와테르도아. 틱바 두가 생게 파세발라 사바베 두바 섭침부 생게도라. 배 야완도는 밑에 두자리에서 배 야완도 기와 말에서 콜라 학바도 싸워셔서 그 교수 땅에 삼로 땅 그래서도. 미세 틱바 제발 예세도아. 미세 틱바 제발 3회 질려서 파세바 마사발라 사바. 근데 전에는 참매벨레로 개완디네 시설다가 녀완도 그래서 등바로 참신다 매번 밀루토벨서 보면 참매질래서 지나서라 참매서 미세베 때버치베 루젠다네 탐제라야시도 미세 틱뼈체바에 루젠 남네 탐제라야시도 접신부시게도 탐제라야 개버köje 딱 말이야 인신 펜션 코나케세 개버kö란게 두다도 인지왕게 펜션 코나케 버마도 콘도 잡진 쉐브레샤 삼 양가 틀는다 바치야다 동에 땅에 텐데 삼르케 줘 말이세라 참에서 틱버체베 루진 탐젤이야시오라 개버köje 두다도 인지 펜버 코나케 펜션 코나케 버마도 티 야와르도네 야완도 내심 남바 탐제도 메차스 야 티스큐나.
And then, second is then being compassionate, especially to those who have committed very heinous negativities, like, for example, the 5 deeds of immediate retribution and so forth. And here it reads in 331, King, out of compassion, you should always make your mind focused upon benefiting all beings, even those that have committed the most serious misdeeds. So those who have done grave negativities, like, say, killing one's mother or father, you shouldn't sort of cast them aside, thinking like, oh, there's nothing to be done for them, or neglect them in some way, but rather they should be viewed, especially with compassion. And so, again, a negativity of immediate retribution would be such that one is guaranteed to take a negative rebirth. There's no sort of hope for gaining a human rebirth. And one should exact a punishment in a way that is wanting to ultimately cause their benefit. It's out of a kind of attitude of altruism. So it's not out of wanting to cause them harm or wanting to make them suffer, but rather even those who have committed the gravest of negativities should be treated with only an attitude of kind of altruism and wanting to bring them benefit. Lare.
좋아. 숨소니 봐. 야. 이제 숨소니 되래. 숨바 대태바서도. 또 숨바 대태바서. 특별 첩진 신경도 들어 학벌도 써와 자고 그래서. 써와 제발 대그래서. Te tevare, tila lakbardo nyemba chaya ten digma resara. Sumba digba chaya sabsin chinge, sammigi lela soba chinge to zurya. Ani tsawa chaya di tegi resa. Te gyusin shagdwa, karesuna. Miswe tikchen, sui chiba, kebara toya, nyingji ki say jire nyingji. Tangi nyamba, tada nyi, 당니 첨베 인지 내서 어디를 다던다 데버가시르스나 참매발라 소바 tikba 메세바 찹첨부 신경게 디젠지 강사 되돌아야시고라 아 근데 파서발라 소바 근데 시게 강사 되돌아야시 닝제와 레기스라 학바도 닝제와 챤네 로아 레기 최제 당일에 냠바 되다 고쳐다 좀 tikba 마부사네 네 손으로 소바 동에 마부 용거 차되어라 대다게 계세 단위 첨부 인지 내 표도 좀 계세 전주 선바서고 학바도 특별 차진 섭첨부 상계 저절로 학바도 저 샤고 그러마도 결라 인지 진짜 대화다 야와도네 다 미팅데 좀 강세 좀 유수 좀 가르치는 도구 당고 센터에 지요 말이셔라 실시 내저 저바 시게 발스타데 롱지 장도 되베나 지다른 만에 겹빼는데 빼찬소도 지다 아마도 강가데 소소쁘고 지금 야고 맹게들이야 라바도 좋아질 다코 가르쳐서 마음바나 kuncho anyo sam lakwa do tsawa chigirmado ko dukja resa ko yaga chiyo hame yuksho sam yawar dorki mare chayra kebar do nete bula tongjiwa nasa la soba tubu nage chiyo na da kange manga yoge chiyo na tele lakwa do simde chigiresa wara tishe chanchu simbe che tamba mela kebar do chanchu simbe ke tsawa deya tamba maige me duga dozola lakwa do ne tsawa chigirmado tezo yawardo ne ko dukjare yushuse yawardo yo mares somyara o debatu chikuna.
So next then is verse 332 that is really getting at why it is right or logical for one to have a special kind of compassion for those who have committed negativities or those that are negativity or are negative, in particularly negative. So it says then you should particularly have compassion for those that have committed the serious negativity of murder. Those ones who have ruined themselves are indeed worthy of great person's compassions. So when it is the case that someone has done something like those 5 negativities of immediate retribution, killing one's mother, killing one's father, and so forth, you should have a special kind of compassion for them, given that it is that the compassionate one, the sort of great being, and the bodhis, so referring to the children of the victors or bodhisattvas, see them as an especially sort of important kind of object of compassion. So here there's an example then given in a quote that is quoted here in the commentary. Then this is a verse from Aryadeva's 400 verses in which it says, just like how a mother in particular has like great compassion for a child who is afflicted by sickness, so too those who are sort of great bodhisattvas, those who have this kind of heroic love, have an especial kind of compassion for those who are unholy or who act negatively. So if a mother has a sick child or who someone who is, their child is suffering in some kind of way, they have a special sort of compassion for them, not out of a desire of retribution, right? But thinking about the future and thinking about the loss in the future. And so too, when it comes to someone who has committed an especially egregious misdeed, one shouldn't sort of cast them aside like, oh, they're irredeemable, or ignore them or something like that, but have a special kind of compassion.
Oh yeah, that's some Sunji Ching Dewa Xiao, Zhonli Yebe Gosu Go, Dewa Xiao, Zhone Dangwa, Zhone Yoba Pa Lu Zhu Dang Ye. Say Mezi Kora Zhonli Zhu Ye remember say, Yoba Zhone Dangwa Dang, Zhonji Ching Dewa Xiao, Zhonli Debe Negab Su, Dubu Dang Yo Ma Rese Ko, Tunjin Saye Tong Ye Kang Yabu Dewa Rese. 다 당부대로 전에 당고 있어야 돼요. 그래서 니지 신남 샤nga par nyamju chunam tawar joyse chamba be nyamchwa de kyobu be kang shabu yoge tende ina ane chon mabu ma chu sia ni ma chik so ni je de ba ta chon le chu ne ta le sha ne ya de se wara ni che kam ra be tamma do so ni che kam shanga par se ta shenda zo ina ya ko kaje kana ni ma nga chu se tende ka ma do tele la wa chon le ka yo ma re se ra nyamchu chonam tawar joyse nyamchu jung ge chamba to se yo arda tawar joyse lama namja chire jo lama ta shida kange menge to na tagi tagi chi sera ka ka che nima chep chu se chem chu ko na chu ta chechun che mer me che koran chon chu chi gi mara mene gaya me tu mimba jo chone chang ne tu ya me ba chechun he se me che koran chon chu sha o tende sula ma che se yo ra 니지암 니싱알 소바틴데 파전에 땅고래 에서라 다이나 현다 시다 첩진인데 이나야 뇽중 강에 여부텐데 이나 여바 땅고래서 팀 멤버들 님마 가셔서 최선식이요 말해서 라마 냠도 채와남 냠도 채와다 정보로부터 줄라 님마 가셔 맞을 땅나 최선식이요 말세 지르바 가야 메트로와 준도 샤바 메바르죠 전에 메트로와 전에 타야 메바 메세르가 전에 샤야 된데 나면 만져 세워라 만져 세워라 야 디줄람
So then next is
Okay.
how one should sort of take care of prisoners in terms of freeing prisoners and making sure that they are comfortable or well cared for while they are imprisoned. And so here one shouldn't make prisoners miserable, really like torture them while they are there, but rather one should make sure that their needs are met and so forth. And so this will come in the various topics here. So first is releasing prisoners, and then second, while they are in prison, making them comfortable. So the first comes in 333, where it says, either every day or every 5 days, release the weakest prisoners, and see that it is not the case that the remaining ones are never released, as is appropriate. So here, those who are most sort of in bad situations, like are very weak or are very impoverished, who are in kind of dire straits, you shouldn't imprison them for long periods of time. So either every day or every 5 days, one should release the weakest of prisoners, particularly if they haven't done something that is particularly egregious. One should make sure that they are able to be let free. And those that say have more, here it says more strength, but one should release them as is appropriate without having them remain there forever. So basically it's saying that there should be no lifelong terms. Those prisoners should be seen as being, again, those that are really destitute or in difficult situations. They shouldn't be held in prison for a long time, and so they should be let go. But even those that are, say, more difficult or more challenging or a little bit more aggressive and so forth, they shouldn't be kept indefinitely, like say for a life sentence without any possibility of being released.
뭐야 다 되네 다 걸려서 숨지 섭시더라 뭐야 다 가르쳐줬으나 kø는 가야 당신 매스 kø는 가야 당신 매스 kø는 저 가라 당신 매봐 대회에서 들어오라 전 정가랑을 주제배 너바체 텐데 샤베는 소라 텔레 tomba membache 개고 네네 tomba 소바 케네 tomba 소바 텐데 수데네 대단 개와레 수가라 텔레 tomba membache베 도미 지세여바 대세도 네네지 tomba단 개그래서 이 tomba mem바라 네바니 개메셰바로 거서 소주소 메셰베 세야 예송게 주티바 나만 소바 주이지 다 예송게 동에를 소바테죠 용에게 뒷바사 그래 뒷바 땅 그랬어요. 교년 가야 땅신 매바다. 전에 땅에 매바다. 텔레 tomba 근데 삼로 땅에 tomba 멤버 찌 그래서 팀당 게 그래서 소소 tomba 라야 되다 괜히 tomba다 그래. 도미 텔레네 교미 제바 뒷바서 tomba 멤버 째는 뒤견도 뒷바사 그래서 어디로 그 말해서 야 딜람 이봐
So then coming in verse 334, it says, from thinking that some should never be released. So if you have the kind of thought that holding others in prison is to cause them harm, or you want to hold them indefinitely without ever releasing them, you develop behaviors and attitudes that contradict your precepts. So such an attitude of like never releasing someone or wanting to harm them in prison would contradict holding even 1-day vows, let alone like upasika vows, those householder kinds of vows. And by having that kind of contradiction to one's precepts, so the next 2 lines read, from contradicting your precepts, you continually accumulate more negativity. So here, when you have that kind of attitude, like I'll never release this person, basically that means that you're consenting to doing something that is against your vows. You can't generate or hold vows while engaging in activities like that. And so, so long as one is doing that, you will continuously be accumulating negativities that are going to bring forth suffering in the future, the lower realms and so forth.
오 근데 용에 여라 그래도 맞잖아 주네 참산 땅가 마땅 저 샤네 거대네 거 냠바선 쪼바나라 코라 땅 주제 되지 여라 아니 녀다 뭐 보다기라 동기라 전에 칼라마데서 샤야다 되게 마부셔라 대저리 되면라 전에 줘야 돼 전에 줘 마도지 전에 대저리 거 야부시고 계시도 단이반에서 그러니까 전에 지시 마다와 어디 단이바 되르다 전에 주변 내가 나야 사야 통해다 저 텐진도 야부샤고 그래서라 가셔 로마 가셔 전에 된데도 전에 주네 강도도 제 초가 되어라 근데 지금은 전에 전에 주에 주래 그제마다 주 대저런가 고민내시 사야 통해 간 것들에서 야부시샤고요라 근데 마산이 되어 말이서 단 전기 체양 야부시샤고를 설 대변내구나 전에 지세 마당와 대봐도 제캔다서 전에 마당 봐도랴 다샹게다 라 대주시거라 다도주샤 알아샤도 튕기거라 대주 강 가바테르 강 두두치게요라 강 두두치마도 근데 전지 말해서 그 미뤄와 거기 전기 체양 마당와 그러니까 대봐도 땡게다 따땡게 따샹게다 근데 트다 서부 트야다 라 사야 동에도 사다 동화다 근데 매다 나나 매라 서보다 덴베 대화리 기세 대외 통지 상황시 그래서 그 도도시에서 고점벌에서 가리네 제저 동담 강가지라 어떻게 시초 말해서 야 됐지라면
So then next, while the prisoners are imprisoned, how they should be sort of kept comfortable. So here then this comes in verse 335, and until I mean we see like there are really some horrific stories of what happened to people in prison, like not being allowed to use the restroom and having to go all over themselves, not being given adequate food or clothing or hygiene facilities and so forth. So that sort of attitude of like, well, it's a prison, we can just do whatever, that is not acceptable. I mean, people can be imprisoned for a purpose, but it's not as though that should be made to be a place of further sort of punishment or torture. So here it says then in 335, until they are released, those prisoners should be made content by providing them with barbers, baths, food, drink, clothing, and medical care. So they should, until they are released, while they are being held, prisoners should be adequately cared for, like given access to, say, barbers, to be able to take care of the hygiene related to their hair and so forth. Should be given facilities to wash themselves and keep those kinds of hygiene. Should be given food and drink, clothing, and medical care. Again, we shouldn't have this sort of attitude of like, oh, well, it's a prison, so whatever goes, goes. I don't need to think about what's happening there. But instead, prisoners should be adequately cared for while they are in custody.
Oh, yeah, 다들 숨주 소주 팀바. 내내 바에 부다라 시도. ane nedo rongwa chande tarase. Nyingji yene charje chaye dangye mayi nechir miyinse. O dande chewaji kukudwa. Kerante tungye kebe chedu zone songe de tungye kebe chedu songarwa. Kol tungye tangye omare kagayaya sagurasana ne. Zone songe karche urasigara. Songu marwase. Tungye kebe chedu songa minamse. 그 도부당에 제도 그 소화 말해서 그 야부제 제도 내는 송고 말해서 전략 좀 봐송고 말해서 대화를 제바 지시를 제냐한테 대화 가르쳐 줘 그래서나 대텔레블에 얘기도 미릭 봐 제바 돼서 보고 잡던데 얘나야 소소 판마도 저 미릭 봐 제나 그 제베 돈에고 또 저부터 같은데 제 요아래서 와라 내가 좀 받아서 너네 바에 부탁라서 너도 미루와 내가 야구 매칭 저 파마 주야고 그 네가 땅에 지도가 그 도부전 땅에 오마 그또 주러시나 섬 야르시나 섬 삼바상베토는 요 땅에 와라 너네 바에 부탁라 너도 로와 찬도다 너 많이 봐 간주마 좀 매칭 상하로 해체도 니지 얘네 살제 차에 다야 마이 내실면서 대인지권에 살제 지한도 와서 저번에 메시아 살제는 마음받는 메시아에서도 당화 제가 말했어. 대체만 코나 야도에 저도 지기 알았어. 어디나시 근데 제고가 그것이 용도 알았어 거라. 니지 이름 살제 봐야 뭐 노르데베시도 제버셔 메뉴스 근데 전에 전이야 사고 체제야 노르잘라 레야다 근데시도 주가 말했어. 야, 근데
So here then in 336, like the question might arise, well, okay, if you're putting them in prison, isn't that for them to suffer? Why would you make people comfortable while they are imprisoned? Like that just seems against what you're doing. Like that, isn't it just to make them suffer that you are putting them in prison? Well, here the example is then given in 336, as if you have the intention of making unruly children behave properly, you should not discipline them out of, you should discipline them out of compassion, not out of anger or the desire for material gain. So just in the same way that like a parent who, out of compassion for their child, when they want to correct some kind of unruly behavior, they're going to discipline them in some way, they might show some wrath, they might be stern, but they aren't trying to inflict pain, right? They want for something to change for the better. So a punishment in terms of even imprisoning someone should be done out of compassion, not out of like a desire to make them suffer, not out of anger, right? Not out of a desire for some kind of material gain, like, oh, by holding them here, I'll be able to get lots of money. The desire, the kind of impulse to imprison should be based upon like a mother or father's wish to correct a bad child's behavior, and that is driven by compassion.
뭐야? 다시 봐드라. 레서 메로나 테버 차와시도. 코바 주주 당시 계제셰체나 코페 야로 마치나. 니만나시 멤버스 코 야로 레서 멘도나. 아니 코피샤 그래서 롱바 샌달 파피 그래서 와라. 경비 당시라. 별에네 경비. 장르부 롱바 샌다던데 당시래. 에텔레탄네 콘조 코테테텐데 레시피게 좀베레텐데 테스테는 거야. Lumba Tina, Nyota Tina, Mesa Kuyang, Tosa Joandra, Tichigora. Oh, Jesura, Shiba. Kalse Dosana. Oh, Rabdan Sobar Chebe, Misera, Shenla, Rabdu Danshin Ra, Shedan, Gabom Shen Super, Shenda Sayata Chinaloli, Jarika, the mission that tried to do the Kamaga, Tende Say, Kotanda, Samloma Dance, Kotin Yanga Yogashina, Taku Lombatina, Yomacho, Lomba Shenda, Tende Susu Lomba Korang, Lomba Himashe, Te Lomba Tar, but in the Shandal Vatsitan, Kotil Tegris, Pishosa, and Kotin Lombatina Matesa, Kari can say that in the Hongo Mara, or Tendeshusa. Oh, yeah, Kasura. Rabna Sober Chebe, Misera, Shenla Tambuche, and it Tangsem Giko Shenda Sego Samsada. Tasu in a lumbo in a cabina, Mima, Su in a self in the Yena, Eco Lombatina, Mashasura. John Doe, Sua Tangnes, Tichon, Shade Tango Desert, So Jebala Soba, Nenju, Chi Meshebe, Chi Meshetatis, Mamba Cotin de Cesare, Tendeko, Denisura, Levarikine, Meshena, Tanyosa, Meshe, Stako Juashinsha, Balakotin de Misset and the Cesamare Samna, Tanyosa, Namjunesha. Tadungarje Dilekon Dosa Mare, some Tanda Chabang, but in the Chigre Sangbutuna, and a Lumba Shandal Pata. Dominuna messages, Cose Yomare, Johnless, Sesunche Yomare. Never Shaya Miki or Shanda, never thank you, Omar. Unit and Lumba Korange, Taring will Lumba Shandalpa, Pisha Kodeswara. Tartan Jeshi is. What is Labna?
So then fourth of this section is verse 337, where it says that if someone is completely unruly, as in you're not able to create some kind of transformation in them, that they should be expelled from the country. So here it says in verse 337, having properly examined and identified particularly hateful murderers, you should send them into exile without killing or harming them. So here, again, if it's impossible to reform someone such that they are going to change, then it said that you should expel them to a faraway kind of land, send them to a place wherein maybe the laws there will sort of correct them. But here, this is in order to prevent them from being able to cause trouble at home. And so here, if there are those that are like thoroughly hateful, that are likely to say kill the king or kill others, and they are released from prison, we should examine well whether they are likely to reoffend or not. Will they do this again? And if it isn't, if you evaluate and say, well, you know, I don't think they're going to actually commit another kind of crime like they did before, then they should be just sort of left alone. You leave them in a neutral kind of place. But if it seems as though they are sort of incorrigible, like they are likely to do something negative again, such as killing and so forth, in order that they not be able to do that in your land, you should send them far away, expel them into, like if they're not someone that can be corrected, they're likely to offend again without killing them. So you shouldn't be engaging in capital punishment or harming them in any other way. You should send them off to a faraway place, expel them far away.
Oh, yeah. Don't they tell us, you were chunding on me to Balasita. Tiger, Niba, Mare. Niba, Chungarme to Balanisa. Niba. Tama Igangari over the Manaba says, Yawata, she would say, that Niba Telecaresana. Narme Sadu Trubala Lapcurese, Saba, Tugres, Tiredua. Tatambutan Sadu Trubala Vetel Caresna, Sobatane, Chamata Cabarchanda, Tepe, Sobatane, Lumbakangal Tato Chevures, Yabuya. ene te peche ta tangbo soba tang tere to longba kasagalia soba tang 킹자 요에 때부 텐점 저 야부시 때 시도시오라 라와예 바르 유군 야레도 라와예 바르 유군 양세라 아니 자마타에 쟁기스스 자마타스 소바들 시도 소바체데 시에세 다도 바예 댄데 바르 셔다 테베 셔다 테베 그러니까 Geshe 어딘bre 다들 가르치도서나 라와야 바차베 체도서 메마참마 라와체 꾸마 차바다 간주마주네 라요 마라 처음에 바치실 너바 메바 야부시 대토에 체도서 개별 땅에 아니 개별 땅 하마고 바치 오래 저 소바 임바든도 하마고 바치 땅고래서라 개별 땅주임 바시라 개별 땅 메셰베 땅일로 와서 다도 생겨 소바다 격바 땅 해서 다도 휴지에서 롱바 가서 갈래 소바 땅고래 대자가 된다 세워라 야부치 롱베나 상생매었다 유군 유군도 야시거라 자마다의 쟁기 시기 자마다 소바 땅에 강가하고 같이 그래서라 시가 다도 바요다 잡바다 잡바 셔다 트베 된저지에서 정말 처음에 라와토데 네트베 어떤데 시도 롱벌 소바탄데 따도시 야부 된자요야 된자시거라 야부죠야 근데 가르셰 자와 미바 제바 봉시 바요다 담바라 공배터죠 자와 미바 김단계와 롱베날 상승 매화체 저 바위 춘대 대보시세 가가 시디체 때 전달이야 찰레셔버려서 소바탄 야 된데서
So then second, we turn to sort of developing previously non-existent practices is how Jeffrey translated this. And so the topic that came before was then not allowing the sort of degeneration of those practices that were previously there, trying to foster those and keep those up. And here is establishing practices that maybe weren't there before. And so the first of these is achieving practices or these phenomenon. First is then sending out, we could say representatives or even spies or surveyors. So here in this verse 338, it reads, independently survey all lands through the eyes of agents, always vigilant and mindful, do what should be done in accord with the Dharma. So, and here really this independently is kind of like in order to preserve one's independence of the land. So whatever kind of land is under one's control, to make sure that there aren't like bandits, there aren't thieves, there aren't people who are doing bad things, in order for peoples to have the kind of freedoms that they do within that land. You should send out, and here it's really using the language of those that are going sort of under in stealth, not being seen. You should send out surveyors or spies in order to preserve the security, the peace and harmony of that country, in order to make sure that there's not disruption or unrest and so forth. One should have a good idea of what is going on within one's area of control, and make sure that there are not, you know, again, things that are dangerous to one's constituency and so forth. And one should always be vigilant and mindful, should have conscientiousness, one could say, to act in accordance with the Dharma. And so, you know, abandoning anything that is other than that, one should really achieve one's purposes with this kind of conscientiousness.
뭐야 다시 소고 되라
Right.
연대내라 당이 제서 가서도서 연대 전부 여기 결론을 속보다 현대 수인의 어때서랴 개부 고랑게네 로바체 때도 따도야 보셔 그래서라 연대 전부 여기 to Sulasan, Yodanella, Tanya Jes, Cabo Korangi, Rabjins, Shibaya Puni, Sayatoyala Sobatu. Ningu Shabdo Yabushugresa, soon the Rimdutas, Shabji Yabushugra. Jachi Cheso, Tinjar Shensa, Tashambuto Zolatato Show, Tayan Day, you get concert to the Shivara, Chidan Rabdu Chonga, the Hindu Kare, Neko, Tezuko Lumbena Lukuyora, oh, Tendelia, Tinji to the Yabuchan, Jabitato Yabushugresa. Sama Namla answer, oh, dinner shit to Yamdo again, so cordless over Shandaya, you in the Tetulaya, Kochiriba, Koran to Timber, Sagu, Mabumba, Robert Shivuresa. You don't hear there. Kene kelon la soba, tangi je seku la soba rabdu, chimba chingu rese, kurdi rimdu la soba, jashida, chesu timba chorshin, yunde, tesa mechebe kansa solaya, o rabdu chunga la soba tesu senja, chimba la soba, ribar kios, ya tindi, hote chila.
Cool. So then the next verse is verse 339, which here is dealing with sort of giving to and supporting those who have good qualities. So it says, through extensive and suitable generosity, respect, and service, devote yourself always to those who are the foundation of good qualities. Do the same for the rest as is appropriate. So here where it says to those who are the foundation of good qualities, those who have great qualities, and this is regardless of their religion, whether they are like ordained, they're Buddhist monastics, or they're Hindu, or they're of other religions, those who have good qualities, one should give generously to them, show them respect and service, and devote yourself to them, really taking care of those who uphold those kinds of good qualities. Again, whether it is Buddhist monks and nuns, or Hindus, or any others, and help them so that their needs are met, so that they aren't in danger of not having enough food or drink and so forth. And even for those that don't have that same level of qualities, it says then do the same for the rest as is appropriate, making sure that even if they don't have especially great sort of qualities, taking care of them with generosity, and making sure that that sangha has enough to eat and drink and so forth.
Oh, yeah, that is it. Oh, yeah, that is so.
So our time is up for today. So I guess we'll be leaving it there for a little bit of a break.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Genla.
Oh, that's
And thank you so much for caring for us like a mother to her only child. Your motivations are so inspiring. Yeah. And thank you, Katrina, for the beautiful translations. Have a look in the chat box for information about how to make an offering to Genla and Katrina and the Abbey for hosting. And we'll finish with some dedications now.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pass by completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the three worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends.
No, yeah. No, that's oh, yeah, that's your attention. No. Oh, yeah, Gala, this one. Record.